We are very grateful to Connecticut Humanities for funding this virtual lecture series. Connecticut Humanities is a nonprofit affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities, which supports cultural and historic organizations that tell the state's stories, build community, and enrich lives. Now I'm thrilled to introduce Nicolas Fox for today's program. A graduate of Harvard College, Nicolas is a maritime artist represented by the Copley Society in Boston and is a signature member, board member, and vice president of the American Society of Marine Artists. Nick was a member of Mystic Seaport Museum's Maritime Art Gallery and winner of the 2019 Emerging Artists Award at the International Marine Art Show. Coming from a sailing family, Nick has studied with many marine masters and is dedicated to maritime and continental realist painting using historic methods and materials. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nick. And with that, over to you.
Okay, so I'm unmuted and here's my video. Am I on?
There you are.
All right. Hi, everybody. How are you? I just want to thank the Mystic Seaport Museum, Arlene Marchionette, and Mirelle Luki, who is the curator of the exhibit that we're talking about today. Their work is incredibly important to people's understanding and appreciation of the art of the sea and the marine culture that we all find so important. So I just want to, I don't have a lot to say about myself. I am a painter. I was a writer. I've worked in business. I've had a lot of lives. And as an artist, the main question I get, and I've gotten for the last 5 years since I've been a professional artist, is why do you make art? And this exhibit is very important because it is about this question of why do we make art and what is the purpose of that art? So for me, I can tell you I've made art my entire life. So I've always made paintings and drawings and sketches from when I was a little kid to being an adult. When I had little children, I would do paintings for my kids of themselves set in their favorite picture books so that they could see themselves there. These are very private artworks, and these are artworks made for somebody I love from me to them. They have little meaning or value or identification outside of my personal experience, right? So then when I became a professional artist, the main question became, what am I going to paint for whom and why? And so you begin to ask different questions as an artist. You share ideas and you share things that are important to you, but you share them for commercial purposes. And so it's no longer a personal impulse, it is more a commercial impulse. And that's one of the things that I'm very interested in examining in the objects we're going to be looking at today. Some of them we don't know everything about, we don't know a lot about them. So I can't say whether they are commercial or personal or not, but I'm going to make some educated guesses related to that. I'm going to be talking a lot about the way the works were executed by the artists. So some of them are more professional, some of them are more amateur, and we're going to talk about what that means. And finally, you know, I just think that as we look at these things, you can be asking yourself, why do you want to look at these works? We want to share human identity. We want to share who we are. Peoples, I should say, who did not write down their histories, people who do not have an oral tradition of their history. The only things we know about them are their paintings and their representations of their lives. So when we look at Stone Age cultures and we're looking at cave paintings, what do we know about the people? Well, they may have made some writing that we can't read because we don't have any common frame of reference for their representational writing. But when we look at their pictures, we can say, this is a water buffalo. These people were obviously farming. They were doing animal cultivation. These are things that we know only because they chose to make pictures of it, because pictures mean a lot in the human continuum. We say, if somebody can make a picture of something, it's worth 1,000 words. A picture is absolutely worth 1,000 words. So I don't want to go over my 1,000 words right now. So I think we might begin the presentation. If you're there, Arlene, I would love to, I think we could start. Okay, so this is the last image. So, here we go. All right. So this is the introductory image. Now I chose this image. This image is okay. Thank you, Arlene. This image is from a logbook. It's not in this exhibit, but it is a representation of what I am interested in. This is a captain of a ship working in his logbook, and he's painting a picture. It's almost childlike, right? So this is a grown man who's in command of a whaling ship, and he's painted this picture. And it's obviously for him and for the people who know the ship and have to know about what happened and what happened on a particular day. So anyway, now we can move on to the first image that from the exhibit that I find really striking. Now, Morel Luki, who is the coordinator of the exhibit, really drew this out in her introduction. This one, Whale Tooth. We don't know anything about the artist, but I can tell you some things about what the artist did as an artist that really, really impacted me and I thought was incredibly important and interesting. Okay, so the thing that sticks out is the water, and the water is colored and it's green. Now the water may not have always been green because, as you can see, the tooth is very yellowed. It may have been varnished at one point, and that might have been blue under it. And anytime you mix blue with a yellow tint, even if it's bleeding through from behind, it creates a green. So whether it's blue or green is not what interests me. But what interests me about this piece is that the artist chose to create the water as a series of convex curves. So when you're painting water as an artist, most of us in Western culture, we have this received notion that waves are convex, where you have 2 points and then you have a sort of well in between them, a valley in between 2 points. Here you see a bunch of hills. Now, what's really cool about this is, first of all, we have verbal reference to this. We call it the bounding main, right? So if this was, and this is not a professional representation, I think we can all agree that this is probably an artist who is working because he has seen something and experienced something and wants to share it. This is the main point of the talk, which is like, this is a private piece. He's saying, this is what I saw, this is what I experienced. I believe. He may have later intended to sell it or wanted to give it away, but this is this thing. The water here, these convex waves that's actually what water swells look like to an artist. So when you are painting water, you have to understand that there are these hill-like surfaces, and those hills are covered with chalk, which is the pointy parts. But this person said, yes, it's like waving, it's like rowing a boat on a bunch of hills. There are some elements to this that I find incredibly charming and exciting, and you can see like it's a pretty good rendering of a ship. There are a couple of things about this that are striking. He has, this artist, I assume it's a he, I shouldn't do that, but I'm going to. This artist has depicted the sails. You can see the reefing points on the sails, but you can also see the rat lines, or the rigging that goes up that holds the masts side to side on the ship. Those stays and rat lines are in front of the sails. Now, that's not something that could possibly be. The sails would have always been in front of those. And we're looking at the ship from the side, very much not from the back. So I find it strange that the sails, that you can see the rat lines. So my question then is, when you allow your whale boats to leave the ship, and your whale ship is sitting, waiting for them to return, you wouldn't have a lot of sail up. So I'm wondering if when the artist was doing this rendering, he chose to have the sail and to just have the bare masts or a couple of sails, and then after the fact said it doesn't look that much like a ship without sails. Now, I can tell you as a marine painter, when you paint a ship where all the sails are reefed and they're all brailed up, it doesn't look that exciting. So maybe this artist was making a personal choice where it's like after the fact he said it doesn't look that great with just the rat lines and the rigging, so I'm going to throw some sails up. So that's one of the issues, and you can see on the foremast, the topsail, which is the sail above the bottom course, that topsail, the one side of the rat lines is not really visible, meaning that maybe he got through all of the ones on the rear, on the mizzen, and then he goes to the foremast, and he's doing the same thing. And he's like, oh, wait, I want to put a sail here. It's just an interesting question. So there are a couple of things that are fabulous about this. One is the perspective. So he has a sailboat. There are actually two, whaleboats. He has two whaleboats on this side of the tooth. So there's one that seems to be either just behind the ship on the other side, or it's coming directly at us. It's not very clear. You can just see the figure below the spanker boom at the rear of the ship. He's another figure in a whaleboat, and it's coming around. The whaleboat to the left here is larger. Like you can see, he's got the perspective. He's got the people in that boat are much larger than the people on the ship would be. So he's got that very well done. He's done that very well. And as I said, these bounding waves, these convex waves, are getting smaller as they get toward the ship. So this is somebody who's thought about perspective, knows some of the conventions of perspective, but is really, I feel like this is very naive or personal work. Again, I don't know if it's a commercial piece, but I feel like this is a memory. Now, if we can go to the next slide, Arlene. So this is the back. So again, we have these great waves, and there seems to be some play back and forth between convex and concave. As you can see along the bottom there are some convex waves that look more like what we now consider to be normal wave art. We have the whales are not to scale, because I think whales were a lot larger than the whale on the left being harpooned by the guy in the boat. And the whale's flukes should be much larger than the whale boat on the right. But obviously he's telling a story. We were out, there were two whales, or this could possibly be one whale with a series of sequential representations. I don't know how familiar you guys are with panoramas or the way panoramas were viewed in the 19th century, but oftentimes you would have an image of a ship doing something, and right next to it you would have the same ship after it's been dismasted in a battle. And then you would have another image after that on the same piece of paper, on the same strip of linen, whatever it was, where that ship would then have sunk and its survivors are being taken away in boats. So I don't know if this is one scene of one whaleboat that this person is representing, but whatever it is, it's fanciful and it's beautiful. And again, it feels very personal to me. So now I'm going to go to the next slide, if I can, to just go into this convex concave question a little further. This is the bottom of the tooth. So we don't know whether the waves at the bottom are just those convex waves at the bottom of this face are actually intended to be convex, or if they were just the concave waves, the concave waves from the other side. So it's a very interesting question of how an artist chooses to represent something that they've seen, because this is somebody's vision. This is what they saw when they were looking at their work, saw what they were when they were looking at the sea, and they made a decision about how to represent it. So this is electrifying to me. It's everything that you're interested in as an artist, and you're interested in when you're trying to put something down to express something that you've seen, something that you want to share. Again, I have no idea if this is commercial or not. So I guess we should go to the next slide, next object. Okay, so again, this is something where it's pretty easy to tell this was not made by a professional artist, right? So why was it made? Well, we have this couple standing under a tree that is extremely, it's a conventional, I would call it a cliche, although it wasn't meant to be cut out. It was just the way trees were represented. If you look at the actual, I don't know how well any of you can see this, but if you look at the actual branches of the tree, they almost have hair coming off of them. So I don't know what kind of a hairy branched tree this would be, but again, it doesn't feel professional. The ground at the bottom is just a figure of like a sort of figurative ground. He's just trying to make it dark so it looks more like the earth. It's not done in any coherent cross-hatched way. We have the man is done pretty solidly perspective-wise. Like you can see he's probably about that height and he's standing under the tree. And then the female figure is much shorter, and maybe that was the perception of the artist, but then we've lost her legs and the rest of her dress in that ground. So this is a very interesting piece to me, but again, it speaks to something personal. It speaks to something where you're trying to share something personal with somebody else. And it's not for consumption. It's not to show anybody else except possibly the woman. And you've gotten your tooth and you're going to carve it and you're going to say, this is going to be me when I'm on land with a top hat, cane, and this is going to be you in a fancy dress because it will have brought back a lot of money from selling whale oil, whatever. You know, this is a really personal feeling piece to me. So now if we move to the next piece, here again, this is a very, I mean, again, I love it. I love this piece so much. It's very exciting. And I don't know if you can see, just like with a little kid doing a drawing, he's been very careful to put in the blood as red. So there's a whale being flayed next to the ship. Well, I can't remember if that's flensed. That's a flensing tool is what they use to get the blubber away from the whale carcass. And you can see all the blood in the water. And the whale over on the right, the second body in from the right-hand side, is a whale that's spouting blood, meaning it's been harpooned. So it's now, there's blood in its lungs and it's expelling that. So this is a very dramatic scene. Now the representation of the water in this one is really cool too, because there's no perspective involved. We have straight lines running back, which if you look at the crest lines on the water on the more right-hand side, on the left-hand side, it's a little disordered. But on the right-hand side, you can see a traditional convention in engraving where you have, you're trying to create a sense of rows of waves. And so the white parts are the crests being hit by the sun, and the bottom, the centers are the convex valleys in between the crests. And because the wind is blowing from left to right, you can see that the sails are blowing or filling from the left. We can see that the waves should be forming in those straight lines, the wave tops, because the wind is pushing that in that direction. And we'll discuss this a lot more later in this conversation, but it's interesting to note here that this is more, and I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Edward Gorey, but you know, he was a freehand illustrator who worked in a lot of, he used a lot of engraving techniques to create effects. And this kind of naive approach to water is one that he used quite a bit. So it's an interesting point. On the sails of this ship, because I'm always interested in drawing and painting sails and figuring out how they draw and how they fill and what details to include, we have all of the reefing points are these very straight hash lines, which is a very strange structure to me. And then the tops of the sails are dark, but the bottoms are light. Now, there's precedent for this in a lot of naive art because the sky is the lightest thing in any nature image. So the sails, which are white, even if they're not being hit by the sun, are often a lot darker than the sky. So this artist is intuiting that the sails should be darker than the sky, but they shouldn't be dark on the bottom because they're white. And you can see that a lot of effort is going into trying to figure out what is going on with how the sails are colored against the sky. I find it very interesting, and it's a question that I approach with concern all the time because you want your painting or your image to be dramatic and you want it to be exciting. So again, this is why I think this is more of a personal piece because he's trying to work it out for himself. I don't know if he's trying to sell this. Of course, I love this image, but you can see there's a lot of indirection in the water in front of the ship. And that may be intentional because he wants to create interest in the ship, not in the water there. And then later on, when we're out in the ocean, on the right-hand side, you can really focus on the way the water is oriented and what's happening to the surface of the water. So I find this piece incredibly striking and interesting. And he's got the white of the interior of the blubber of the whale very clearly delineated. He's got the blood, he's got the whale carcass spinning in the water. This is just a great piece. And I have to say, I haven't been able to see it in person and I cannot wait to see it in person. So, okay, I guess we should go on to the next slide. If we can. All right, so now as a painter, of course, this is an image that I really, really fell in love with. Here you can see, this is guy he's writing in the ship's log about what happened. You can see the lined paper, you can see the lines in the paper through the artwork on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side. So this, why is he making this work of art? This was the question I was asking myself when I looked at it, because it is really intricate and he has taken a lot of care with this. So he's used blue ink, he's used green ink, and he's used a sepia ink or a brown ink that may have been darker in the past because it may have aged and turned brown. But he's writing, this may be, it's in a ship's log. So the only people who would have seen it were the people who owned the ship and him. So this question of like, I will never forget this night, September 17th, 1836, and he has taken care to draw this, and then he has this cartoon in the bottom right-hand corner of long faces, and he's drawn 3 sailors who are extremely unhappy, right? So, but let's talk about some of the aesthetic aspects of this painting. So it's dark, it's a stormy day, evening, we don't know exactly what time of day it is. I'm sorry, it is night, it's nighttime. So he has painted to dark sea with chroma, with a lot of blue and green. That was what he had at hand. The waves are humongous. And this is where a picture is worth 1,000 words. He has created a very clear picture of terrifyingly high waves. What are these 90, 100-foot waves? And the ship is being tossed around. There is a lot of distress right in the center of this work, right where the sails would be on the reef. The reef sails would be on the masts, on the spars. And if you look at that, it's very weathered and scratched. And I'm wondering if he was trying to convey the ripped sailcloth that would be blowing free when the wind ripped through, the reinforcing. It could be that, maybe it's just worn paper, we don't know. But we have this sky that's incredibly dramatic, this dark brown, dark blue, trying to create grays that are extremely striking. You can see the water, the mist being blown off the top of the waves behind. There is a detail that I can't identify, and it is, if you look in the valley just beyond the prow of the ship, there's an object there. I can't tell what it is. It almost looks like a little, sea monster style face. I don't know if that was intentional or if it's just a random stray mark. But this is just an incredibly dramatic work. Again, who is it painted for? He has characters on deck that are blue. Some are made out of sepia tone. Again, why did he choose some in sepia and some in blue? Did he say, I didn't have enough people on deck? His figures, now I don't know how closely you can see them, are very well executed. He's got these active poses very well marked out in just 1 or 2 tiny pen strokes. And we can only assume he's working with probably a feather nib. I don't know whether he would have been working with a steel nib pen or a gold nib pen, but we don't know. His deck is white, and the sail is white, even though it's nighttime. So, and we know there's no moon because of those clouds. So again, it was an artistic choice to show us the people on the deck, to show us the decoration at the back of the boat on the fantail, to make sure we knew that there was a railing there. All interesting choices. And again, it's one of the more exciting things as an artist when you look at this and you say, this guy was not creating this for anybody. He wasn't being paid to create this work of art, but he took real care with it. And it's really, it's just, those waves are just powerful and exciting. I love to see this. So anyway, it's a great work. Oh, wow, I'm burning through my time here. Okay, so we should go to the next slide. If we can. This is so exciting. Okay, so now this again, this is another logbook. And I broke this out because it is so exuberant and so delightful that I just want everybody to see it. This is actually in the New Bedford Whaling Museum's collection, but it is emblematic of what you do find in these logbooks. This is almost like a child's drawing of what a ship would look like, with the whales spouting blood. All of the whales are spouting blood. Now this is on the Saya de Mala, bank, which is near Madagascar. These are Yankees saying that we saw the bark, the Bruce Fairhaven. We saw, finbacks, we saw sperm whales. And what I love about this is that this is a person working. I don't think this is ink. I think this is watercolor. Although I don't know, many people who were natural philosophers of the time carried watercolors and did sketches of wildlife because they were often seeing things that people had never seen before. What I love about this image, however, too, is that the ship is, the sails and the rigging are pretty expertly painted, and he's got his sheets, tacks. He's got all of his braces done correctly. He's got the standing rigging is done well. The sail set is accurate, so he's not engaging in any fantasy here. He's even got a topsail on the spanker. So, I just found this to be exciting. And he's got the colored letters. This looks like a child's, school book from the period. But the exuberance of it is fantastic. So let's go on to the next, if we can. But yeah, I really recommend, by the way, all of these logbooks are available online for anyone to look at through the New Bedford Whaling Museum. Okay, so I wanted to talk about because this is a piece that I actually just had a brief exchange with Morel Luque about this earlier today. I'm fascinated by this. It's a tropical port, and there are two buildings, two fortress-like buildings at the mouth of this port, and they both are flying American flags. So I don't know where this is, but it could be any U.S. possession anywhere. So it's after 1789. The trees are green. Again, I can't tell how much you can see from this on your screens, but the palm trees are green. They're tinted, and the flags are tinted with red, and there's a British flag of a British schooner sailing in, and I just find this to be an artwork that is probably, like, I think this is a commercial work. Certainly it's naive. The representations of the buildings are very basic, and what looks like trees on the left-hand side above the lone building standing facing us is actually a pot filled with 3 flowers. That's not a tree. It looks like trees to a casual observer, but it's actually a pot of flowers. So I kind of believe that this is not a personal work. I feel like somebody did this for sale somewhere, meaning that if you were in port, if you were a sailor who came into port, you might have found someone selling this kind of image. And why do I think this? My only observation of it is, why would it matter personally to a sailor that there were the flags and there were the fortresses, and we have a very flat water line. We have a symmetrical design, which is, again, symmetry is more seen in naive art than in fine art, but we lose some of the symmetry with the trees on the right and the hills and mountains on the right. So I feel like this is a more commercial piece than a personal piece, but that's up for interpretation. Okay, we should go on to the next. All right, so this is a logbook from the Morgan. Now this painting, because I'm not going to call it anything other than a painting, I love very much. We have a number of things here that are interesting to a painter. So, okay, the wind direction. We can see the wind is going from left to right. The flags are going from left to right. The pennant at the top of the ship is going from left to right. The waves are all serried in a rank from left to right. So we know that the crests are all in line with the wind. But the weather vane on top of the lighthouse is pointing in the opposite direction. And if you can see a very fine pencil line at the top of the flagpole on the Ottoman fort, the arrow of the wind directional up there is also pointed to the right. So I don't know if the wind changed direction or if he decided to, a sailor knows the most important thing to a sailor is what direction the wind is coming from. And it looks like they are being blown onto a lee shore, but the lighthouse says, no, the wind is going in the direction that would be blowing them offshore. There's so much to love in this drawing that it's hard for me to get around it. Of course, the rigging is great. You have all the leech lines. You have lifts. He's actually got the spanker sail is brailed up, so it's done in those weird loops around the mast, so it makes it look like a sort of sausage hanging at the back of the ship. And he has a couple of things in here that are very interesting that I think are very unusual. At the top of the fort and on top of the hill, there are these two objects, and they look sort of like figs with hats on. And I think that those are meant to be locals in some sort of local dress. Even up very close in high, no, I think back, yeah, even in very high res, they look like people holding maybe parasols, but I need to find out about them because I love them so much. And there's a cannon on the stone there near the lighthouse or whatever the directional post. So this is something where when you go to look at this is, again, it's in the logbook. He's trying to make it artistic and fun and interesting for himself because, as we all know, being at sea can be unbearably boring. But this is obviously an exciting scene. You've got, an Ottoman fort on the lee shore. What is your relationship to the Ottomans at any point? We don't know. I can't at this moment. I don't know. But I just love this work. And he's taken, as a sailor, he's taken a lot of care to make sure all of the reefing lines and all of the lifts and braces are in the right place, and the sheets and tacks. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, well, another painting that's just fantastic, and the water is chaotic. This looks almost like a Japanese print, and he may well have seen a Japanese print. Now, this is, again, it's a personal work. This is in a logbook. But it's very finely crafted. He's worked hard on it. The perspective on the ship is very good, and it would have been hard for him to see ships at this perspective as a sailor, because oftentimes you weren't close enough to a ship that was tossed like this. He has put an object in the foreground, which is a trope from most of the paintings of the period. So we have 1839. We have a lot of marine paintings at this time in the US and in Europe, where we have objects in the foreground to create a foreground interest. I don't know what he was painting there. I don't know if it's a ship's boat that's been lost. But the question to me is, why would he include it in this object unless it's to make art? So again, we have these very figurative clouds in the upper right-hand side. They look like a bunch of bowling balls stuck in the sky. They're billowing toward the ship. The ship, he had some trouble with execution because he didn't want to make the background of the ship too dark, because then you lose all the lines. So he's made the sky dark except around the ship, which is an adorable thing. And the sails are the thing that's exciting to me. And the thing that I don't get to see a lot in the world is a sailor's depiction of what it is to have your sails ripped to shreds by the wind. And this is a really great depiction of that. I can see the pointers on it. So anyway, so again, this is a work, it's a personal work. Okay, and now we'll go to the next image. Again, personal joke drawing. Who knows whether this was a tar that he personally knew, or if it was a caricature of a general tar. But port a little is very funny. There's only a little port left in the bottle. And they have the song of the day. It's a portrait of life on board ship. Again, not for sale. It's a personal memory. This is somebody creating art for themselves or for a peer to laugh at, much as school children draw funny pictures of their teachers, I presume. So next image. Okay, so this is where commercialism and mediation come into play for me. And this is what I have to say, when you become a professional artist, you have to leave some of your personal predilections and desires behind in making art. Here we have somebody who has said decoupage with cutouts from a cliche book. He has created what is not, it's Scrimshaw, I guess, but he's not scratching into the wood. He's merely pasting these beautiful images onto the wood. If you're not a great artist, hey, I've done decoupage a ton of times, because you want to get the image onto something and you want to have it look nice for, I have a screen in my house that's all decoupage. On the right-hand side, we have a very traditional trope image of a nice lady. This could have been copied from somewhere, or it could be an idealized portrait of someone's sweetheart. There's no way of knowing. We don't know anything about this particular tooth, but she is very much in a heroine's pose or in an illustrator's pose of a demure lady who's very pretty. So we can only assume these works were, the work on the left, I would presume, was made for someone as a treat. And the work on the right may have been done, I mean, I just have this feeling that this was done for someone. Do a portrait of my sweetheart. And a very good scrimshander who could make that wreath at the bottom and have very good hash marking, the way you create the cross green to create darkness and light. Somebody did that very well. You have a light background behind her hair, which is darker, but it's darker than her skin, which is meant to be very fair. And we have the textiles and the ribbons well represented. We have there's a lot of work going on in that one. So I feel it's more professional, and I think it may have been bought. Okay, so let's go to the next image. So again, one of the things I'm interested in is the myth of America, the creation of the myth of America. This was, I studied with a guy named Sackman Berkovich, who was a historian who was very interested in how countries, in particular the United States, have created the myths of itself. And one of the ways you create a myth is by creating national images that people can say, this is who I am. So this is something that you would buy from an artist, because this is obviously made by an artist. You've got some excellent, I mean, and maybe it's a folk artist, but I don't think that I would make this particular, I would carve this, spend the time carving it for myself to share with somebody I loved. I think this is something that you make, somebody makes who knows how to carve and knows how to scrimshaw, and they are selling it to somebody who will consume it and share it with other people for value. This is what I'm interested in as an artist. This is, I think, a professional work done by somebody who could make money making images for other people. So, and we have the beautiful compass roses and the patriotic imagery of Columbia on the ocean, and we have the whale ship and E pluribus unum, and it's fantastic. So we should go to the next image. Okay, now this is one of my favorite ones of the whole thing. So the left, it turns out, Muriel Luki discovered, I believe, that this is actually, the woman on the left is a cutout, is a copy of a Harper's Ladies magazine image. And the image on the right is possibly my favorite image in the whole thing, which is this horse. Who did this and why? How do we get our heads around what the artist was after here? How do we figure out, like, horses with the whiskers on the face? Is it a painted horse? The mane is all limp, and the anatomy isn't all right. But obviously, this is somebody who took a lot of care to draw this horse. What are these two images doing together on the same tooth? In history, we don't know why objects survive, and we don't know what they meant to people. But a whale's tooth wasn't cheap. It wasn't nothing. It was a lot of work. So somebody really meant to make this tooth. Okay, so next image. Okay, so now here is the Constitution and the Java, right? So this is a series of images, this side and the next side. These are national myth making. Again, this is not a personal remembrance. The sailors who were fighting in this battle did not see it from this angle. They did not see the lithographs that were made after the fact that created this sense of identity for America. I think this is a souvenir that you buy as a patriotic American because you want to say, hey, look at this. This is what we were able to do against the British. If we go to the next slide here, we'll see that what happens to the Java at the end of the scene is that the Java is completely dismasted and lying in the water, and the U.S. could sink it mercilessly. In the Peabody Essex Museum, you will see a lot of a whole series of paintings of this, destruction of the Java. Why, again, I think this is a more professional piece is you can see the border, while not expertly done, is in fact a border to create a frame for the image. So I think this is, again, a commercial piece. Here you have a more professional representation of the sails. The sails are a little backed, which is interesting because you can see the wind is blowing toward the ship, so the sails are being pushed back against the masts. There's so much to talk about in these works. I'm sorry that I'm rushing through them, but if you go and you really take a look at these objects in the exhibition, there's so much to see when you look closely. The water in this one, there's no perspective in the water, but what the artist has done is created some sense of waves in the front, and then he's just been like, well, it's just lines in the back. Which is very interesting. So we should go to the next one, I believe. Okay, this is a personal image. I don't know if anybody would buy this picture. This is a very strange action where we have the wind going from left to right, or right to left, I guess. You can see the pennants on the ships, and the ships are in battle. One ship is being fired on the center. You've got two ships firing at it. I think this is an amateur representation, and it may have been a battle that this person was actually in. And now we flip over to the other side of this tooth, and we can see what I believe is his family. This is not an expert portrayal at all. You can see the attempt to copy a very fancy border, but he hasn't gotten the scale right on any of the diamond shapes. And maybe this is the work of a semi-pro being done for somebody. It's like, I want pictures of my wife and kids, and I want my ship battle on the other side. It's hard to tell, but you know, look at the artistry in this. If it's a personal work done by an amateur, it's stunning. And if it's a semi-professional work done by a person who wants it for personal memory purposes, it's also stunning. If it's a commercial work, it doesn't do anything, right? It's not that stunning, but it, as a historical piece, it is brilliant. So let's go to the next slide. I'm eating up my time here. Oh, okay. So here I said this is possibly Thomas L. Albro. It turns out it is totally Thomas L. Albro. He signed the other side. In this, this is a very naive representation of the ships, although you get some great perspective drawing on the far right of that ship that we're seeing on the aft quarter. But what I love about this tooth is the sun shining from the sky behind these bulbous clouds. It's one of the prettiest things that I've seen, and it made my day. It was like one of those great tombstone carvings in New England. Along the bottom, you can see natural animals. But Albro was a professional. I mean, basically, people coveted his work. He was an excellent scrimshander. Let's move to the next slide. Okay, so again, this is a professional. Spencer Pratt was an artist. Now, this is the mechanic, ship mechanic that he actually served on. But again, I don't know if this is a piece that he would have done for himself. And he's got these sort of meaningful phrases on them, and the one on the left says, "Remember me when far away." And on the right, it says, "The hope of return is the joy of a tar." And these are, you know, these corny phrases that you would buy this as a memento, as a souvenir, and give it to your sweetheart, so she can remember you're on this ship. And I think he probably sold these, and I think they probably, you know, he did pretty well. Spencer Pratt went on to, I think, live in San Francisco. I might be corrected with that. And he actually had a Scrimshaw shop, and he was a recognized professional in it. So I admire this work. It's beautiful American craftsmanship. So, but very much professional, not personal memory. Okay, so let's move on. This, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, just again, the incongruity of why you have a medieval falconry scene on one side of a whale's tooth, and then you have a ship in a storm on the other. We know nothing, as far as I know, we don't know anything about the maker of this tooth or why these things were represented. I think maybe it was for sale, and maybe as a presentation piece, or as a sale piece, you would have one side exposed to say, look at how good I am at this. I don't think this is for personal memory, because there's nothing really emotionally personal in either of the images, except possibly on the man on the horse. It could be an aspirational image of what a sailor. I was discussing this actually with Arlene earlier today, and she brought up that it could be an aspirational image, and it really could be. You know, this is what I want my life to be like when I'm ashore. I'll be a lord on a horse with a falcon and in medieval garb. So we should go to the next image, I think. Okay, so again, this is this professional American myth making that I'm interested in. This is not a personal memory. You buy this because of the Battle of Lake Erie and Commodore Perry. And if some of you know who Commodore Perry is, he's actually standing in the longboat that is, or jolly boat that's, he's standing right under the prow of the ship to the left. And the myth was, or it may be true, the longboat had a hole in the side, and Perry was standing there with his foot over the hole so the boat wouldn't flood before he got to the American ship on the right, to which he was transferring command. So he's charging forward. So we'll go to the next slide, and you can see a close-up of the kind of lithograph that was made of Perry doing this. And you can also see Commodore Perry's, the back of that tooth. Again, professional piece. You don't create an etching like that of that quality, or a Scrimshaw piece of that quality of a portrait as an amateur. So it's a professional piece. It's great. I love it. I wish I could have it in my life. Also, why personally would you write Commodore, very carefully, Oliver H. Perry, USN, and have that an ornate border if you weren't going to be selling this for value, because every time you add something, you're creating more value. On the right, you can see a lithograph of that myth making of Perry with his curved sword pointing. And in the other side of the tooth, you can see he's got a curved sword that he's pointing toward the ship he's going to. So, okay, we'll go to the next slide. And I think we're nearing the end. Yes, this is the last piece in the show, in my presentation. So this is as commercial as it gets for me, and it's an era that I find interesting, but I don't engage. It doesn't engage me emotionally because this is a commercial piece. You can see it's almost a professional style of engraving. I mean, it's not engraving, it's Scrimshaw, obviously, but he's using a lot of engraving techniques of cross-hatching, and the whale's back is so carefully delineated. We see the curves in the cross-hatching. We see, the water is done in a very impressionistic way. If you were looking at an engraving or a lithograph or a steel cut from, the late 19th century, early 20th century, this is what it would look like. This is a totally professional work. And most crucially, this is signed. So in all of the professional pieces we've seen, the artist has put their signature on it. It's their mark. They're saying, this is not for me, and it's not for somebody I love or know. It is for another person, and I want them to know that I made this. So this is such an important thing, because again, I was talking about my history as an artist. I never signed anything that I made for my kids. I never signed anything that I made for my family or my wife or anything. I've only signed paintings and dated paintings that I've given or sold to people, or I've sold to people, I should say. And there's a tremendous difference in meaning of the work. Like, he's creating a dramatic scene here that will appeal to anyone. We don't know any of those men in that boat. They're not even a real portrait of the piece. Like, we're not invested emotionally in that, except possibly in the steersman, right? But this is a very professional thing. This guy, William Perry, worked until the 20s. He was a professional scrimshander. He made a ton of really excellent artworks. And I'm not saying he's not a great artist. I'm just saying that in terms of the feeling of sharing, seeing and sharing, that is so important to an artwork, he is making a commercial work for sale for somebody else. And the last image is a close-up of the ship that is in the upper left-hand corner. This ship, if you compare this to all of the other ships, you see how expert this is. He has got leech lines, bunt lines, clue lines. He's got the rat lines are always behind the sails. He's got the correct sails being furled. He's got, he's luffing one of the fore, not the forestay, but one of the stay sails and the jibs at the front. This is, the wind direction is obvious. The clouds are going in the right direction. The water is very much those convex waves that I was talking about at the beginning, where he's using, this is a convention of how we represent water. It's not, is it what water looks like? Yeah, a little bit maybe, but it's a convention that we all instantly recognize. So this is where I want to leave us in this moment of, this is a truly professional work for sale. And it says, and this work is called Onward, or Going On is the title of the work. And it says the whaling ship Ohio. So who is going to buy this? Friends of the people on the Ohio veterans, and their wives and families, and or enthusiasts. So this is not a personal work. This isn't sharing something you've seen. He may have seen, I mean, he was in the whaling ships, he knew the business, but this is not a personal work. This is a professional work, and it's a commercial work. So that's what I mean by the commercialization of experience, is this thing where we are actually no longer sharing things that are, this is what I saw and this is what I want to share. We're now saying, this is commerce, where I can help you share something that you never saw. And it's a slightly different structure to the meaning of making art. And that's where I'm going to end my talk. And I'm sorry to have taken so long. So any questions, or anybody wants to ask me? I can't hear anybody, so I don't know how I'm going to get the questions.
Give you the questions, Nick.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I've gotten a few questions via the chat. And actually, a couple came in when we were looking at the Isabella storm scene. So Pamela commented that there is lightning in the picture, so perhaps that is why the sail and the deck are white.
Yeah, sure. Great observation. I didn't even think of that.
And Elisa commented that the storm scene looks almost Japanese to her, and asks if you see any evidence that the sailor artists are influenced by any non-Western art traditions, perhaps from Pacific ports.
For sure. I mean, these guys were seeing everything. Okay. So we don't get a real Orientalist, strain in Western representation until the 1880s. But sailors have totally been all over the world. They have seen representational works for sail. The Chinese maritime works, and you can see a lot of those at the Peabody Essex as well. Those existed. Artists knew them. I mean, sailors knew them. They saw them in ports for sale, and they were very central to. Now, in terms of Japanese works, though, I don't know what the exposure of these guys in the mid-19th century would have been to Japanese sea paintings. But it's certainly, I mean, if anybody was going to see it, it would have been them. So sure, I mean, absolutely, I would say 100%, why not?
Great. A couple of questions about Scrimshaw. What tools were used to create Scrimshaw, asks David.
Okay, so this is, I have to say, I want to say very clearly, I am not a Scrimshaw expert. In fact, I know next to nothing about Scrimshaw. I really know about engraving, but knowing engraving and Scrimshaw is akin to engraving. Usually what you would see are these very fine point needles and chisels that you would guide with your hand across the surface like this. You would keep, this hand would be the main support for the work, for the tool, and you're driving very carefully across. You can also scratch like this with a distinct with a fine point needle. So that's what I presume they were working with. Think about what you would have had on ship. You would have a ton of needles on shipboard. So as the tradition grew, I can't imagine there would be any lack of sharp instruments with which to scratch the face of baleen. And then you can use ink or any other pigment you can find to create that color, and then you wipe it away. As you know, in printmaking, you create the grooves, you ink them, and then you wipe off the face. And in a print, you just then take that face and you press it onto paper, and that's how the image is transferred to the paper. With Scrimshaw, it's a direct method, so you're not reversing the image. You don't have to do any reversal. And I don't know what the pigment was or how they wiped it off, but I mean, one can only guess. It would have been either something as basic as ash or something as elaborate as an India ink that you would apply very delicately. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on it, so I don't know all of the techniques.
Great. Well, thank you, Nick. That actually was another question that came in that you answered already about the colors that were used for both black and colors.
Sure.
So do we have any other questions? All right. Great. Well, Nick, thank you so much for all these fascinating insights on these pieces. You really looked very closely. Oh, I do have another question coming in. An early piece shown a busk. Oh, hang on a second. And I have another one that came in via email. So, so an early piece shown a busk used in a woman's foundation garment had horizontal design rather than vertical. How does this compare with other items in the collection?
Well, actually, I mean, there are a few other busts in this exhibition, and in the collection, many of them are vertically oriented. So that's why my thought would be that this would have been a commercial piece, because if you're thinking about it, where the bust is going to go, you would think in a vertical image. And many of the ivory pieces and busts you see are done with vertical images. If you're making a memento, so I think that piece, and again, I have no evidence for this, and I can't speak to the real intent of the creator or the designer of it. My belief is that while absolutely 100% a busk, is also a work that was created as a memento, as a souvenir. And so when you have a souvenir object, it's purpose becomes less important than the image that's on it, right? So that's something that I think, I don't think anybody would object to using it as a busk, but if I were a sailor in a foreign port or in a distant tropical port, and I was able to acquire a busk for my sweetheart or my wife, and it had this image on it, I don't know that she would use it as a busk. I'm not sure, but I do know that busks were often so personal. Talk about your personal items. I didn't include other busks because I didn't want to get into some of those issues. But if you want to talk about a personal object, if you're making a busk for your sweetheart or spouse, you can, that's an incredibly personal act. That's sharing something personal with someone. And that's why this work is impersonal. It doesn't have, other than the weird flower pot on the skyline, it doesn't have anything personal that I can really see in it. So that's why I think it's more of a souvenir than an actual personal object that you would make for somebody that you knew. So that's my interpretation of it. And I just saw a question pop up asking where you can see these originals. They were all in most of them are in the exhibition, Sailor Made at the Mystic Seaport Museum. So I recommend you get there as soon as you can to see the show because it looks stunning. Sorry, anything else?
Great. Well, I have an observation from Steve about the other dramatic storm scene. He thinks that the thing floating in the water behind the ship is a sea anchor or drogue.
A sea anchor. I just couldn't place it because it looks so dark. But yeah, it could absolutely be a sea anchor. If people don't know what a sea anchor is, it was often a structure. It could be a cylinder, it could be a cone, it could be a square sail that was let out from the ship on a long line, and it held water. It would slow the ship down from being pulled through the water. It was like a giant brake or a parachute in the water that would hold the ship, that would slow the ship down. So that could have absolutely been what it was. Again, I find it to be a very interesting question about, what that was, but he did choose to represent it. Now, most of the sea anchors I thought were submerged, but again, I don't know. I've never deployed a sea anchor, so I can't say I know what his intent was, but that could absolutely be what it was. Thank you very much for that observation.
Great. Well, I think we're at time here. So again, thank you, Nick, and thank you to all the participants who joined us today. I will be emailing a survey to everyone to get your feedback on the program. This is an important component for our funding, so we really appreciate you taking a few minutes to fill it out. And please be sure to tune in for more Sailor Made talks. We added a fourth talk, actually. So these lectures will take place for the next 2 Wednesdays at 1 p.m. You can just visit the calendar on the Mystic Seaport website to register. So thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.